We've heard there, Martin Marjoram, what students have had to say, and then we've heard from the Minister on this. We were looking to speak to Minister Norma Foley. She wasn't available to come on the programme tonight on this matter. But just on this issue, what does the TUI want to see? Do you want the standard exams? Do you want students back in the exam halls and to do away with this idea of calculated grades?
I think it's very important that the examinations will go ahead. All of the public health advice currently says that, and actually there are arrangements in place for all of the additional components, the orals and the practicals, some of them in the Easter break, and second sittings as well, contingency sittings for those who might be affected by COVID. So that's a very positive thing. One other point, though, that needs to be made is we can't repeat what we did in previous years. The last 2 years, while there was an estimation process, school-based, with regard to how students would do, had they the opportunity to sit examinations, there was a very important standardisation applied to that because of the obvious variations that happen. It's really difficult to deliver a system that is fair across the board. I mean, you just have to look at just how elaborate are the processes that go in to our state examinations every year, but they are trusted because they are fair. So in order to deliver that, you do need some bedrock data that is objective to base it on. What was done in the last 2 years relied very heavily on the junior cert data of the classes that were sitting, or indeed in 1 year didn't sit at all because they couldn't in the first year of this. So it's really, really important to have something like that.
You won't have that benchmark
in the absence
data
of that. In the absence of that, it's quite unwise to promise to students that something can be delivered that may not be possible. And I agree with the student voice that's been on here. We do need an early decision on this, but an early decision that promises something that turns out to be undeliverable is nearly the worst thing you could do. Okay. Or if we do try to put something together to replace that gap, it may not work. It may collapse as other systems have collapsed in other jurisdictions, to the great damage of the students involved and to the great uncertainty of how they move on, how they move into work, into apprenticeship, into third level education. So there are real dangers in making an ill-considered decision. For all that we want, and we're working very, very hard in classrooms to help the students and to support them, but we do have to be very careful how we move forward.
OK, when you hear that, Donnacha O'Leary, just on the way you approach it, and that this year is different to the other couple of years because of that lack of data. I suppose that the junior cert results is something that teachers may have relied on in order to get to build a benchmark for the final grade that they're going to get upon leaving school. Do you agree that it's going to be trickier this year to do in that regard?
Well, look, I mean, I think you've said that it's not the same as last year, and that's true, but it's certainly not a normal year either. It is still a pandemic year, and, you know, we all think back on our own leaving cert and recall how challenging and stressful it was. We didn't have to contend with all the anxieties and stresses of a pandemic, nor did we have to contend with weeks, indeed months, of a school closure in fifth year, even when you return to school 6 years, and rightly, being given priority within that year. And then this year you could have endured 2 periods of self-isolation, 3 periods perhaps, and similarly for your subject teacher. So what we are hearing is, and from my engagement with students, and indeed a lot of teachers as well around the country, they're saying to me that it is proving extremely challenging to cover the course in a lot of subjects. What the student voice is saying, to my mind, is that they want the exams to go ahead, but that they want the option of an accredited grades. And you know, there were people calling for the cancellation of the Leaving Cert last year that didn't want exams to go ahead. I knew that students wanted exams at that stage. I know that they want exams at this stage, but it's the choice. And the accredited grade offering the backup to students who have found it really, really hard to cover the course. So yes, it can't be the precise aim as last year, but what I would hope is that the stakeholder group tomorrow would be examining how we can get around that and how we can ensure that there is a standardisation, that it is fair, that it is rigorous, and that it can stand up to scrutiny. I believe there are ways to do that. It can't be precisely the same as last year.
That you believe that the hybrid model, the twin track approach, the sitting exam as well as the calculated grades need to be looked at and need to be confirmed for this year.
I think there has to be that choice, yeah, absolutely.
That choice to students over the last couple of years has certainly shed light, I think, on the difficulties and stresses that Leaving Cert students feel. Suzanne Connolly, from students, from a child's perspective, the last couple of years have been especially difficult. What would your view be on the extra pressure that students are now under as we deal with more uncertainty?
I mean, these 2 years have been really difficult for all children. We know that. And for the children that Barnardo's really are worried about, children from social and economically disadvantaged backgrounds, it's been really, really harrowing. And we need to bear in mind that there's a lot of parents out there who've been really supportive of their children and really enabled them to do as well as they could with remote learning. But there's some families dealing with really difficult situations like acrimonious separation, domestic violence, poverty, and those children haven't had the support. So they're really, really struggling. And one of the things we've wanted in Barnardo's is for the government to say what they're going to do to help those children catch up, to help those children do as well as they can, ideally in a hybrid system, because that's what children that we provide services to are asking for. And they certainly need certainty, as Stella has been saying. And it's incumbent on us to do as well as we can for these really vulnerable group of children that we have in our society. And one thing I'd like to say is I understand that the Minister has somewhere on her table a review that was done in relation to the senior cycle. And there was an actual review by the National Council for Curriculum Assessment involving all the stakeholders in relation to the senior cycle. So it would be very helpful if that report was published and was part of this discussion about what's best for children.